My very first memory is not of joy or safety. It's of cotton. Endless white bowls stretched out as far as my young eyes could see, like patches of cloud scattered across the ground. I was only 4, maybe 5, when Mama first took me to those fields on Whitmore Plantation in Georgia. She bent close and whispered how to pluck the cotton without letting the sharp husks cut my tiny fingers. Gentle but quick, Isaiah, like catching fireflies, she told me. My name is Isaiah. That's what Mama always called me. But to Master Whitmore and his overseers, I was never Isaiah. To them, I was just boy, you there, or sometimes nothing at all. Just the sound of the whip cracking through the air, demanding I move faster. Only in the dark of our small cabin, when no one else could hear, did Mama whisper my real name. She told me Isaiah meant salvation of the Lord. And then she'd smile, though it was always a tired smile that never reached her eyes, and she'd say, "The Lord has plans for you, child. Plans bigger than these cotton fields." Whitmore Plantation stretched across 300 acres of Georgia soil. More than 100 enslaved people worked that land. Up on a gentle rise stood the big house, its tall white columns and wide porches a place where the master's family sat in comfort while we labored below. But it was Master Whitmore who controlled our daily lives. That belonged to Overseer Brock. Brock was tall, raw-boned, his skin burned red by the sun. He carried a whip as though it was part of his own arm. His booming voice rolled across the fields, and the moment he shouted your name, a chill ran through you, even under the blazing Georgia sun. Mama once whispered to me, "That man's got a hole where his soul should be." I was 6 years old when I first truly understood what it meant to be a slave. Before that, the hard work, the rough cabin, the scratchy clothes, it all just felt like life, the only one I knew. But my understanding came suddenly and brutally one summer's day. Mama and I were in the far eastern field. She worked quickly despite the limp in her step, a limp left behind from the time Brock broke her ankle for dropping a basket of cotton. I was struggling to keep up, my small hands clumsy and tired. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat stung my eyes. Then it came, Brock's voice, cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Boy, you there, woman's child." My heart skipped. I looked up and saw him striding toward us, whip already loosened in his hand. Mama straightened, placing herself just a step in front of me. "He's working as hard as he can for his size, Mr. Brock," she said firmly, though her eyes stayed lowered. "Didn't ask you nothing, Hannah," he spat. "Boy's falling behind. Time he learned what happens to lazy slaves on Whitmore land." It all happened so quickly. He grabbed my arm, yanking me forward. I still remember how small I felt, trapped in his grip. Mama's voice broke with panic. "Please, sir, he's just a child. I'll make up his share." The whip cracked, striking across Mama's shoulders as she tried to shield me. That sound, wet and sharp, will haunt me until I die, but worse was the look on her face. At first, surprise, then quickly replaced by something else, a silent message to me, be strong, show nothing. The second strike caught us both. The leather tore across my back for the very first time. Pain unlike anything I had ever known surged through me, and I cried out. Brock snarled, "That's right, boy, you remember that sting. You were born to it, born to feel the whip when you don't keep up. You ain't nothing but property here." That night, in the darkness of our cabin, Mama bathed my wounds with cool water. Her hands were so gentle, the exact opposite of what I'd endured in the fields. "Why, Mama?" I whispered. "Why do they hate us?" She shook her head softly. "They don't hate us, child. Hate would mean they see us as people. They see us as things. And a man doesn't hate his plow or his mule. He just uses it until it breaks." Then she turned my face to hers. "But listen to me, Isaiah. No matter what they do to this body, they don't own what's inside. Your thoughts, your heart, that belongs to you and you alone. Never forget that." By the time I was 10, I could pick cotton as fast as some grown men. By 12, They sent me to work in the tool shed with old William, who once had been a blacksmith before being sold to Whitmore. That change saved me. William taught me how to mend broken tools, forge nails from scrap metal, repair harnesses, skills that made me useful in ways that kept me away from the worst beatings in the fields. Mama, though, stayed in the fields. Each season bent her body more and more. I watched her every evening as she limped back to our cabin, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. And inside me, something dark began to grow. It came to life the day I was 15. I was working in the tool shed when I heard shouting from the eastern field, then running feet. Without thinking, I stepped outside. A crowd of workers had gathered. At the center, I saw a figure on the ground. A cold weight dropped into my stomach and I ran. "Get back to work," Brock's voice thundered, whip snapping over the crowd. "The rest of you back to your rows." But I pushed through the workers, past their grim, sorrowful faces, and then I saw her. Mama lay crumpled in the dirt, blood soaking through her worn dress. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her eyes cloudy with pain. "What happened?" I dropped to my knees, cradling her head in my arms. "Mama." "Boy, get back to the tool shed," Brock barked, but his voice barely reached me through the roar in my ears. One of the women, Esther, leaned close and whispered, "She collapsed. Couldn't keep up today. He wouldn't stop." I looked up at Brock, really looked at him. The whip in his hand dripped with my mother's blood. His face showed nothing. No anger, no regret, just mild irritation, as if her suffering was no more than an interruption to his day's work. "Isaiah," Mama's weak voice pulled me back. Her hand, rough and calloused yet still strong, reached for mine. "Remember what's inside." Her eyes locked on mine, desperate to leave me with something important. Then suddenly they changed, a flicker of surprise, a faint gasp, and she was gone. I felt it. I felt the very instant her spirit left that broken body. And in the same moment, something inside me shifted forever. The quiet rage I had carried for years hardened into something sharp, focused, and unshakable. That night, under the silver glow of the Georgia moon, I stood at her grave long after the others had gone. I whispered a vow into the earth that covered her. "They'll pay, Mama, for every lash, for every cruel word, for your last breath. I swear it on your soul. They'll pay." That night, the boy who believed in his mama's God died with her. In his place stood someone else, someone patient, deliberate, willing to wait for the perfect moment to collect a debt written in blood and pain. My purpose was set, and at the top of that list was Brock. 7 years passed after Mama's death. 7 long years of keeping my head bowed, my mouth shut. "Yes, Master, right away, Mr. Brock. I became exactly what they wanted, obedient, hardworking, complaint-free, the perfect slave. But behind that mask, I was watching, learning, planning." By 22, I was a grown man, tall, strong, hardened by years of labor. The tool shed had become my permanent place after old William passed 3 winters earlier. Before he died, he had told me, "You got a gift, Isaiah. White folks see your hands as useful, and when they do, they forget to watch your eyes." He was right. I became a fixture on Whitmore Plantation. Reliable Isaiah, the one who could fix anything. To them, I was still property, but valuable property. The kind you keep in good shape. The kind you sometimes trust. That trust was what I was waiting for. It was Sarah who finally pushed my plan into motion. She worked in the big house, a young woman only a few years younger than me. Over the years, we had grown close, stolen whispers, quiet moments of tenderness in a world that offered us none. She reminded me of Mama, steady, strong, unbroken inside. One evening she came to the tool shed after her chores, her face bruised, her steps stiff with pain. "What happened?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Master's son," she whispered. He's home from schooling up north, caught me in the pantry. Young Master James, 18 years old and already walking the same vile path as his father and grandfather. Sarah's voice shook as she added, "He said to expect him again. Said his father told him it was his right to break in the house girls." Something inside me snapped. The careful control I had held for 7 years trembled on the edge of collapse. That night, I showed Sarah what I had been preparing in secret all this time. In the far corner of the tool shed, beneath the floorboards, I had built a hidden space. Inside were the tools of my plan. A small knife I had forged from scrap metal. A rough map of the plantation. A pouch of herbs Esther had taught me about, some for healing, some for other uses. And most important of all, a key. It was a perfect copy of the key to the gun cabinet in Master Whitmore's study. He had once asked me to make a spare. I made 2. He never knew. Over the next 2 days, the plan came together. Sarah would create a distraction inside the big house. While everyone's attention shifted to a shipment arriving from the South Road, I would use my key to access the guns. In the confusion, we would escape. But even the best-laid plans have a way of breaking apart. The day of the shipment dawned heavy and hot. As expected, most of the plantation's eyes were on the approaching wagons. With tools in hand, I walked toward the big house, moving as though summoned for repairs. I was halfway across the yard when I heard it. A scream. Not the controlled outcry we had planned, a real scream. A scream filled with terror. It came from the direction of the kitchen. Without thinking, I ran. Around the corner, I saw it. Brock was dragging Sarah by her hair down the back steps, her face twisted in pain. Master Whitmore followed, fury written across his face. "Thieving wench," Brock spat, throwing her to the ground. In his hand, he held a silver spoon from the dining room. "Found her hiding this in her dress." "I didn't take it," Sarah cried. "I swear I didn't." But I knew instantly. James had set her up, punishment for refusing him. 50 lashes, Master Whitmore said coldly. "Make an example of her." Brock's mouth curled into a cruel grin as he reached for his whip. And in that instant, I made my choice. The careful plan I had built for years shattered in an instant. "Stop," I said, my voice carrying across the yard with a strength that startled even me. The yard went silent. Slaves didn't give orders. Slaves didn't interfere with punishment. Brock froze, then slowly turned toward me, disbelief and anger fighting for control on his weathered face. "What did you say, boy?" I stepped forward, calm and steady though fury boiled inside me. "I said stop. She didn't steal anything, and you know it." Master Whitmore's face flushed dark red. "How dare you speak?" I cut him off. Young Master James put that spoon in her dress because she wouldn't let him force himself on her again. The air itself seemed to hold still. The slaves around us stared wide-eyed. Even the birds went quiet. Finally, Master Whitmore hissed through clenched teeth. 50 lashes for him, too. Then the stocks for a week. Brock's whip unfurled as he stepped toward me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. The first lash tore across my chest, ripping my shirt open. The pain burned, familiar but overwhelming. I stayed on my feet, eyes locked on Brock. "Isaiah, please," Sarah cried from the ground. "Don't do this." But as Brock raised his arm again, I acted. Years of strength built in the tool shed and years of rage coiled inside me gave me speed he didn't expect. I caught his arm mid-swing. His eyes widened in shock. He barely got out. "What the?" before my fist crashed into his jaw. Bone cracked beneath the blow, and he stumbled, spitting blood. He recovered fast. Dropping the whip, he drew the knife at his belt. "You're dead, boy," he spat, circling me like a predator. Behind him, Master Whitmore was screaming for help. Sarah was crying. The others stood frozen, horrified but unable to look away. But I saw only Brock, the man who had ended my mother's life without hesitation, who had lived his days without conscience. He lunged, blade flashing toward my stomach. The knife ripped my shirt but missed flesh. We grappled, his heavier frame nearly pushing me down, but hatred made me strong. I drove my knee hard into his gut. He doubled over with a gasp. My elbow slammed down on the back of his neck, and he crashed face first into the dirt. I was on him before he could recover. I tore the knife from his grip and pressed it to his throat. "This is for my mother," I hissed. "For Hannah. Do you even remember her? Do you remember watching her die in that field?" Recognition flickered in his eyes. Then came fear, real fear. "Please," he gasped. The man who had never once shown mercy was begging for it now. Mama's face filled my mind. Her gentle touch, her quiet words, "Remember what's inside." For a heartbeat, I hesitated. Then rage swallowed hesitation whole. My hands clamped around his throat. I squeezed with every ounce of fury I had held for 7 years. His eyes bulged, his fingers clawed at me, but I didn't let go. Not when he went limp, not when the light drained from his eyes. I only stopped when the crack of a rifle butt smashed against the back of my skull, and the world went black. I woke to agony, blinding, relentless agony. My arms were stretched high, bound to the beam of the whipping shed. My back felt like raw fire, because it was. Flesh torn open. A mocking voice I didn't recognize said, "Thought you'd sleep through your own punishment. We wouldn't want that." The whip cracked again, carving another line of fire into me. Then Master Whitmore's voice, cold and sharp. "You know the penalty for striking a white man, don't you, Isaiah?" He didn't wait for me to answer. "Death, but you've been useful, so I'll show mercy." Another lash fell, and another. 30 more lashes," he said calmly. "Then 2 weeks in the stocks. After that, you'll be sold downriver. The sugar plantations in Louisiana always need strong backs. As for the girl," his tone twisted cruel, "she'll get her 50 lashes too, then sold separately. A brothel in New Orleans will take her." Even through the haze of agony, those words cut deep. Sarah condemned to a fate worse than death, all because I had finally unleashed my rage. The lashes blurred together until I lost count. When they finally cut me down, I couldn't stand. 2 field hands dragged me to the stocks in the center of the quarters. They locked my wrists and ankles in place. As they tightened the wood, one of them leaned close and whispered, "We're with you, Isaiah, whatever comes." Through swollen eyes, I recognized Tobias, one of the strongest men on the plantation. His words lit a faint spark inside the darkness consuming me. That first night in the stocks was pure hell. Rain poured down, soaking me, turning the ground to mud beneath my body. Fever came with the night, dragging me into visions of Mama, of Sarah, of blood staining the cotton fields. But on the second night, I heard the faintest sound, soft footsteps approaching through the dark. "Isaiah," came Sarah's whisper, barely audible. "Can you hear me?" I forced my eyes open and saw Sarah kneeling beside me. Her own back was wrapped in rough bandages beneath her thin dress. They had whipped her, too, though maybe not the full 50 lashes. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, my voice nothing more than a rasp. "If they catch you—" "Hush," she interrupted firmly, pressing a damp cloth against my cracked lips. The cool water soaked through, easing the dryness in my mouth. "Esther made a paste for your back," she said softly. "It should fight the infection." I felt her gentle hands spreading something cool over my wounds. The relief was so sudden it brought tears to my eyes. "Listen to me," Sarah insisted, leaning close so no one else could hear. There's talk among the quarters. Tobias and some of the others, they're planning something. When you stood up to Brock, it lit a spark. Her words filled me with fear for her. If they find out, I warned. 3 nights from now, she whispered. Wait for the signal, a lantern in the western field. She squeezed my hand once before slipping away into the darkness. The next 2 days blurred together. I drifted between pain and fever, half conscious most of the time. Each night, Sarah returned, bringing water, scraps of food, and medicine. During the day, other slaves passed quietly, some whispering encouragement, others slipping me bits of bread or cornmeal when the overseers weren't looking. On the 3rd day, the fever finally broke. My body was weak, but I could feel strength returning. My back still burned with pain, but the worst of the infection had passed. That night, I kept my eyes fixed on the western edge of the cotton fields, waiting. Hours dragged by with nothing but silence. Then, at last, I saw it. A faint glow bobbing gently in the distance. The lantern, the signal. With trembling fingers, I reached for the small key Sarah had given me, hidden beneath my body these past days. It slid into the lock, and with a soft click, the stocks opened. Slowly, painfully, I pulled my arms and legs free. Standing was torture. My muscles screamed in protest after being trapped so long, but I forced myself upright. At the edge of the field, I found them. Sarah, Tobias, Esther, and nearly a dozen others. Their faces were set with determination. We're heading north, Tobias explained in a low voice. Through the swamps, then we'll follow the river. About 30 miles from here, there's a maroon settlement. They'll take us in, hide us until we can move farther north. How many of us? I asked. 27, Esther answered quietly, including children. My stomach sank. Moving so many people, especially little ones, would be almost impossible without being discovered. We turned to gather the others when a voice cut through the night. Well, now, what have we here? Brock's replacement stepped out of the shadows, a rifle in his hands, his eyes glinting with malice in the moonlight. I knew something was stirring, he sneered, leveling the gun at us. Didn't expect to find you free, Isaiah. Everything slowed. I saw Sarah's terrified face, Tobias's hand inching toward a hidden knife, and the overseer's finger tightening on the trigger. A roar ripped from my throat as I lunged at him. The rifle fired with a deafening crack. The bullet whistled past my ear, but I was already on him. We hit the ground hard. My hands locked around his throat, pressing down with everything I had. His eyes bulged as he kicked and clawed beneath me. Isaiah, Sarah cried, her voice distant, desperate. Others will have heard the shot. I knew she was right, but I couldn't stop. Not this time, not with freedom so close. When the life finally drained from him, I felt nothing. No relief, no joy, just emptiness. We have to move now, Tobias urged, hauling me to my feet. Already lanterns flickered in the distance. The big house, the overseer's cabins, they were coming. This way, Esther commanded, leading us toward the forest that bordered the plantation. Stay together. We ran into the dark, 27 souls desperate for freedom. I glanced back once at Whitmore Plantation, the only home I had ever known. The place where my mother died, a land soaked with blood and tears. The Georgia swamps swallowed us quickly. At night, they were like another world, black waters reflecting nothing, Spanish moss hanging from the cypress trees like tattered cloth. It was a place of danger and refuge all at once. We moved in a broken line, Tobias in front with a stick testing the ground. I stayed near the middle despite my pain, helping Esther guide 4 small children too young to understand why we were running. By false dawn, we had made maybe 5 miles. A pitiful distance, but it was all we could manage. Tobias led us to a small island of dry ground hidden among the trees. "We'll rest here through the day," he said, scanning the group with worried eyes. "Move again at dusk." Some collapsed instantly, too tired to even think. Others began gathering branches and moss to make rough bedding. Sarah organized a small group to search for anything edible. I sank heavily against the trunk of a cypress tree, biting back a groan as the rough bark pressed against my raw back. "Let me see," Sarah said, kneeling beside me. Her fingers moved carefully over the torn flesh. Her face tightened with worry. "The wounds have opened again. You're bleeding." I hadn't even noticed until then, but now I felt the warm trickle running down my spine. "We don't have the medicine you need," she whispered anxiously. "I'll be fine," I told her, though we both knew it wasn't true. Infection in the swamp meant certain death, slow, painful, and inevitable. Esther appeared beside us, holding a handful of dark leaves. "Chew these into a paste and pack them into the wounds," she instructed. "It's not proper medicine, but it's better than nothing." For the next 3 days, we pushed through the swamp. We moved mostly at night and hid during the day. Food was scarce, but we survived on cattail roots, wild berries, and the few fish we managed to spear with sharpened sticks. Despite Sarah and Esther's efforts, my wounds continued to fester. Fever would come and go, leaving me so weak at times that Tobias and another man had to carry me. In my delirium, I sometimes saw Mama walking beside us, her hand guiding me through the black waters. On the 4th day, disaster struck. We were crossing a deep section of swamp, the water chest-high even for the tallest among us. The smaller children clung to adult shoulders, eyes wide with terror as the dark water swirled around them. Then it happened, a splash followed by a scream. One of the women stumbled into a hidden pocket of deeper water and went under. She surfaced, thrashing wildly, unable to swim. "Martha," Tobias shouted, turning back against the current to reach her. But it was too late. The water exploded as a massive alligator lunged, clamping its jaws around her leg. Her screams filled the swamp as the water turned red. We stood frozen in horror. In moments, Martha was gone. Even as shock rippled through the group, another sound reached me, the distant baying of hounds. My eyes met Sarah's, and in that instant we both understood. The slave catchers had found our trail. "This way," Tobias urged, pointing to a dense stand of cypress. "We need cover." We pushed harder, driven now by fear. By nightfall, we reached a small island of higher ground, rising just a few feet above the swamp. Exhausted beyond measure, we collapsed together. "They're closer," Sarah whispered, shivering in my arms. "The dogs." I knew then what I had to do. I had known it, deep down, since the moment we fled. "Sarah," I said quietly, taking her hand, "I'm going to lead them away." Her head snapped up. "No," her refusal was fierce, immediate. "Listen to me," I pressed. "I'm slowing everyone down. These wounds, you know as well as I do, I won't last much longer without real medicine." "You don't know that," she argued desperately. "Maybe, but maybe we're just circling in the swamp while they close in." I squeezed her hand tighter. "This way, at least some of you have a chance." We whispered and argued until our voices broke, but my mind was set. As dawn began to lighten the sky, I rose to leave. Sarah pressed a small pouch into my palm, strung on a leather cord. "Esther made it," she explained softly, "for protection." I slipped it over my neck. The goodbyes were brief, too raw for words. Sarah was the last. She kissed me then, her lips wet with tears, carrying promises we both knew we could never keep. "Find me," she whispered fiercely. "When it's over, somehow find me." Then I slipped away, heading east as the first rays of daylight broke through the trees. I made no effort to hide my trail, snapping branches, disturbing the water, even calling out as though others were with me. Within an hour, the dogs picked up my scent. Their frenzied baying told me the plan was working. They were following me, not the others. By midday, I could hear the voices of men along with the hounds. The slave catchers were closing in. My fever had returned, leaving me weak and stumbling. But the swamp was changing, the ground firmer, the water thinning. I was reaching its eastern edge. With the last of my strength, I climbed onto a fallen cypress that formed a natural bridge over a narrow channel. If I could cross and break my scent in the water one more time, maybe, just maybe, I'd buy them more time. But I wasn't fast enough. The first dog burst from the brush just as I reached the middle of the log, a huge bloodhound, baying with triumph. Behind it came two men on horseback, rifles aimed at me. "That's far enough, boy," one shouted, his weapon steady. "End of the line." "I know what you're thinking," the second said coldly. "But these waters are full of gators. You saw what happened to your friend back there, didn't you? Nasty way to die." They knew about Martha. Had they been that close the whole time? "You're the one who killed Overseer Brock," the first man said. "Whitmore's offering a good reward for you." "Where are the rest of them?" the second demanded. "Tell us, and maybe we'll ask Whitmore to show mercy." I laughed then, a hollow, broken sound that startled even me. "There is no mercy in men like Whitmore," I said, "or in you." The first man shrugged. "Have it your way," he raised his rifle. "Last chance, where are they heading?" I looked past him, back toward the swamp that had nearly killed me but might yet save those I cared for. Somewhere out there, Sarah and the others were still moving, still hopping. "They're free," I said simply, "and that's all that matters." His face hardened. "Not for long." As he steadied his rifle, a strange calm washed over me. My thoughts turned to Mama and her last words. "Remember what's inside." At that moment, I finally understood her meaning. It wasn't hatred and it wasn't revenge. It was freedom, the one thing no master could ever truly take away. The freedom to choose, to stand tall, even to die on my feet rather than live on my knees. The rifle fired. The shot struck me with the force of a hammer, throwing me backward off the log. As I fell, everything slowed. I caught a glimpse of the sky through the cypress branches, felt the air rush past my face, and thought of Sarah's kiss. Then the water swallowed me, dark and final, and I knew no more. By all rights, I should have died in that swamp. The slave hunter's bullet had ripped through my shoulder, missing my heart by only a few inches. The fall from the log knocked me out cold, and I sank beneath the murky water that had claimed so many before me. When I woke again, I was coughing violently, water spilling from my lungs. I was lying on a dirt floor in near darkness. A face leaned over me, dark skin, white hair, and eyes filled with equal parts wisdom and weariness. "He lives," the voice declared to someone beyond my view. It was a woman's voice, deep and marked with rhythms I had never heard before. "Impossible," came the reply. "He wasn't breathing when Jonah pulled him from the water." I tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough that sent sharp pain tearing through my chest. "Be still," the woman said firmly, pressing a steady hand against my good shoulder. "The bullet passed clean through, but you've lost a great deal of blood. Your body must rest." Fragments of memory returned, the escape, the swamp, the hunters, Sarah, the others. My voice rasped. "The others, did they?" "They rest now," she interrupted gently, avoiding my question. I slipped in and out of consciousness for what felt like days, maybe even weeks. When I finally woke fully, I was alone in a small, round hut. Its walls were made of packed earth, rising up to a thatched roof. A single small window let in a dim beam of daylight. You shouldn't be sitting up yet." The white-haired woman stood at the doorway, carrying a wooden bowl that sent up fragrant steam into the cool air. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice weak and dry. "Who are you?" "I am Adisa," she said. "You are in Trembling Earth. As for how you came to be here," she gave a slight shrug, "that is a longer story." "Trembling Earth," I repeated. "That is what we call this place, this village," she explained, motioning toward the world outside. "Your people might call us maroons, but we call ourselves free." Hope rushed through me so strong it left me dizzy. "The others from Whitmore Plantation, did they make it here?" Adisa studied me for a long while before answering. "Some did," she said at last. "2 days after Jonah pulled you from the creek, 21 souls arrived. The rest," her voice grew heavy, "the rest were lost to the swamp or to the hunters." My heart sank. 21 out of the 27 who fled. 6 lives lost in that desperate gamble for freedom. "The woman, Sarah," Adisa continued, her tone softening. "She asked about you. She believed with all her heart that you had survived." "Is she?" My words trailed off. "She is alive," Adisa confirmed. "She and the others who arrived have already been taken north, toward the underground railroad stations in South Carolina." Relief swept over me, so powerful it nearly broke me. Sarah had made it. Even now, she was moving closer to true freedom in the north. "How long have I been here?" I asked. 6 weeks, Adisa replied. "Twice we thought you would die. Your wounds were severe and the infection nearly claimed you." As my strength slowly returned, I began to learn the ways of Trembling Earth. This was no temporary hideout. It was a true settlement that had survived for decades. The people here had created a life in the swamp, hunting, growing gardens on the small fertile patches of land, sometimes trading with friendly outsiders. They had also built defenses. Every adult was trained to fight, sometimes with weapons, but mostly with whatever the swamp itself provided. I began to find my place among them. The skills I had learned in the tool shed turned out to be useful. I could mend their few metal tools, even craft new ones from whatever materials they had. They taught me how to move through the swamp as they did, how to read its signs, respect its dangers, and trust its protection. Still, I felt the pull northward. Sarah and the others were already on that road while I was healing here. One evening, as Adisa and I sat outside her hut, watching the moon rise above the cypress trees, I spoke my heart. "You want to go north," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I admitted. "Not right away. I owe Trembling Earth a debt I'll never be able to repay. But in time." She nodded slowly. "To find Sarah, to see if what grew between you in the shadows of bondage can live in the light of freedom." "That's part of it," I said honestly. "But also, I need to know what it means to live without looking over my shoulder, without hiding." "Even in the north, a black man must be cautious," she warned. "Freedom there has its own limits, its own dangers." "I know," I said, "but still I must go." A faint smile touched her lips. "When you are ready, Jonah will guide you to the first station." But that journey would not come yet. 3 days later, a runner arrived at Trembling Earth with news that changed everything. The boy's name was Elijah, from Whitmore Plantation. Part 7. Elijah brought grim news. Edward Whitmore, humiliated by the mass escape and the death of his overseer, had joined forces with neighboring plantation owners. Together, they had formed a coalition with one goal: to find and destroy maroon settlements across the region. "They've hired professional hunters from Virginia," Elijah reported urgently. "These men specialize in tracking runaways through swamps. They've got dogs bred specifically for the water and guides who know these wetlands. They will not be the first to try finding Trembling Earth. one of the elders said dismissively. But Elijah shook his head firmly. No, this time is different. They have maps and information, detailed information about routes and markers. Impossible, Jonah scoffed. No one outside our network knows those things. Someone talked, Elijah insisted. I heard Whitmore say it myself. A cold realization hit me. One of our people must have been captured and tortured until they revealed the path to Trembling Earth. When will they come? Addisa asked, her voice steady despite the heavy weight of the news. They were gathering when I slipped away 3 days ago, Elijah said. They could already be on the move. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Every able-bodied person in Trembling Earth worked tirelessly to defend the settlement. I threw myself into the task, focusing on creating new tools and defenses from whatever limited materials we had. On the morning of the 4th day, the first alarm came. A scout burst back into the village, his dark skin pale with fear. They're coming, he panted. At least 20 men with dogs. They're moving slow but steady, following the markers. The plan we had was simple but born of desperation. The youngest children and the elderly would be evacuated along the northern path, while the rest of us stayed behind to defend our home. I was placed on the southern perimeter with Jonah and 5 others. We carried whatever weapons we could manage. Jonah held one of the settlement's few precious rifles, while I clutched a spear carved from cypress wood, its tip hardened in fire to a deadly point. Time crawled as we waited. Then, suddenly, silence fell. The birds stopped calling. Even the insects ceased their constant droning. They're close, Jonah whispered. Get ready. The first dog appeared on the trail, a lean bloodhound straining at its leash. Behind it walked a white man in the familiar leather vest of a professional slave hunter, a rifle resting in the crook of his arm. 2 more dogs and handlers followed, then a larger group of men. My stomach tightened when I recognized some of them. Plantation owners, including Edward Whitmore himself. Whitmore looked older than when I had last seen him. His face was worn, his once immaculate clothing replaced with gear suited for the swamp, but the cold arrogance in his eyes remained the same. The boy said the settlement should be just beyond that rise, Whitmore announced, pointing toward the heart of Trembling Earth. Jonah gave the signal, a bird call that sounded natural to untrained ears, but to us it was the cue. The defenders of Trembling Earth sprang into action. From my hiding place, I hurled a sack of blinding powder directly into the hunters' midst. It exploded in a white cloud, sending men into coughing fits as their eyes burned and watered. Chaos erupted all around. From other positions, more sacks of powder burst. Caltraps were scattered across the path. A massive log, held back by vines, came crashing down, narrowly missing the invaders. The plan was working. The hunters split into smaller groups, some chasing one voice, others another. Divided, they were easier prey for both us and the swamp itself. Through the settling dust, I caught sight of Whitmore's face twisted with rage as he tried to regain control. I watched as he and 3 others broke off, heading east, following what they thought was the retreating defenders, straight toward the sinking grounds. I should have let them go, let the swamp claim them, but something deep inside rebelled at leaving Whitmore's fate to chance. After all he had done, justice needed to be face to face. I moved silently through the underbrush, keeping pace with their group. They were already struggling, the firm ground beneath them giving way to swampy mire. I circled ahead and positioned myself on slightly higher ground, where thick cypress roots formed a natural platform. When they came into view, I stepped out, spear raised. "That's far enough," I said, forcing my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. Whitmore froze. Recognition spread across his face, followed by a harsh laugh. "Isaiah," he said bitterly, "of course it would be you, the ungrateful who started all this." "I prefer to think I finished something," I replied, my grip tightening on the spear. "Something that should have ended generations ago." The men with him lifted their rifles, but Whitmore raised a hand. "No, he's mine." His voice dripped with hatred. "You cost me everything, boy, my overseer, my property, my standing among my peers." "You never owned me," I said firmly, pride swelling inside me. "You owned my labor, my time, but never me." His face twisted in fury. "I'll have your head on a pike for what you've done, for what you stole from me." "What I stole," I shot back, the words hitting me like a blow. "You stole my mother's life, you stole my childhood, you tried to steal my humanity." Deliberately, Whitmore unslung his rifle and raised it. "I'm going to enjoy watching you die." "You already watched me die once," I said quietly. "In that cotton field, the day your overseer whipped my mother to death. The boy I was died that day." Something flickered in Whitmore's eyes. Not remorse, but maybe the first faint realization that he was facing not a runaway slave, but a man hardened by pain and injustice. But the shot never came. With a sudden, sickening sound, half squelch, half suction, the ground beneath Whitmore gave way. The thin crust of mud collapsed, and he sank to his knees in quicksand. His eyes widened in shock and terror. His rifle went off harmlessly into the air as he dropped it, arms flailing wildly. The men with him scrambled backward. One slipped and fell, instantly caught in the sucking mud as well. "Help me," Whitmore screamed, his voice stripped of all its former power and arrogance. "For God's sake." I didn't move. I just stood there, watching as Whitmore sank deeper and deeper into the quicksand. His arms flailed wildly, but the more he struggled, the faster he went down. "Please," he cried, the quicksand now up to his waist. His voice had lost all authority, trembling with fear. "I have money. I'll pay you anything you want." "Freedom," I answered simply. "That's all I ever wanted. That's all any of us ever wanted." "I'll give it to you," he promised quickly. "Signed papers, witnessed, everything. Just help me out of here." I said nothing. I just stared at him. How many times had men and women on Whitmore Plantation begged for mercy, only to be ignored? The quicksand was at his chest now. His companions had already run, leaving him behind. It was just the two of us now, former master and former slave, face to face, as nature delivered a justice no Georgia courtroom ever would. "Isaiah," he sobbed, saying my name like we were equals for the first time. "In God's name, don't let me die like this." I thought of Mama, her gentle hands, her quiet dignity, even when Whitmore's overseer destroyed her body piece by piece. A part of me wanted to walk away, but another part reminded me, remember what's inside. With a deep breath, I placed my spear on the cypress platform and leaned forward, stretching out my arm. "Grab hold," I ordered. Whitmore's face showed both hope and disbelief. He reached, but the gap was still too wide. The quicksand swallowed him almost to his shoulders. Inch by inch, I pushed forward, extending as far as I dared. Finally, our fingers touched. I gripped hard, and he clutched back desperately. With every ounce of strength I had, I pulled. The swamp resisted, trying to keep its prize. Then, with a sound like the earth itself sighing, his body shifted upward. Slowly, painfully, I dragged him closer until he half collapsed onto the cypress platform, covered in foul-smelling muck but alive. We sat in silence for a long time, both gasping for air. Finally, Whitmore broke the quiet. His voice was hollow, shaken. "Why?" he asked. "Why save me?" I thought carefully before answering. "Not for you, for me, because I choose the kind of man I'll be, just as you chose the kind of master you were." He flinched, as though the words themselves had struck him. For the first time, Edward Whitmore seemed to realize that the weight of his actions rested entirely on his own shoulders. "What happens now?" he asked. Some of his old arrogance tried to creep back into his voice. I picked up my spear and kept it ready. "Now you leave. Take what's left of your hunting party and go. Tell the other plantation owners the swamp protects its own." "And if I refuse?" I only looked at the quicksand he'd just escaped. His eyes widened with sudden understanding. Slowly, with effort, he got to his feet, swaying. "This isn't over," he muttered, but even he didn't seem to believe the words. "It is for you and me," I replied firmly. "Go back to your plantation, Whitmore, but remember this, your world is ending. Maybe slowly, maybe painfully, but it is ending." Without another word, he limped away, following the trail his men had taken. When I reached the settlement, I found small groups of our defenders returning. Their faces were tired, but their eyes carried pride. "We drove them off," Jonah reported. "Lost 2 of ours. They lost at least 5, maybe more." He looked at me, noticing the mud caked on my clothes. "Whitmore." "Alive," I admitted, "but changed, I think." Jonah frowned. "You should have let the swamp take him." "Maybe," I said, "but that wasn't the swamp's vengeance to take, not only the swamp's." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're a strange man, Isaiah, but I think I'm beginning to understand why Sarah believed in you so much." 2 months after the battle, I stood at the northern edge of Trembling Earth, a small pack on my back and weapons in hand. Jonah waited a short distance ahead, already alert and ready. Elijah had chosen to stay with the settlement, but he came to see me off. His farewell was awkward but sincere. "I'll tell the stories," he promised. "About you, about all of this, so people know it's possible to fight back, to be free." "Tell them about Mama too," I asked. "Tell them about Hannah, who never lost her spirit, even when her body gave out." "I will," he vowed. We embraced one last time. "Blessings." Then I left Trembling Earth behind. Jonah set a brisk pace through the thinning swamp. For 3 days, we traveled in near silence until we reached the South Carolina border. "This is where I turn back," Jonah said. He pointed toward a ridge in the distance. "The first safe house is about a day's journey northeast from here." "And Sarah?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Did she say which way she was heading?" Jonah's face softened. "She mentioned Pennsylvania, said she'd heard of a settlement of free blacks near a place called Gettysburg. It's not much, but it's something, a direction, a hope." "Thank you," I said, holding out my hand. He gripped it firmly. "Stay alive, Isaiah, and if you find her," he hesitated, "tell her Jonah kept his promise." The journey north was neither quick nor easy. The Underground Railroad was not an organization, but a fragile network of safe houses, secret paths, and brave people willing to help. Every step was dangerous, but every step was also a step closer to freedom. Part 9. I traveled mostly at night, guided by the North Star when the sky was clear and by hidden paths when it was. In North Carolina, I nearly faced disaster when a patrol of slave catchers suddenly appeared on a rural road. My guide, a Quaker woman, saved me with her quick wit, pretending to be a wealthy mistress while I played the role of her servant. That clever act spared me from capture. Crossing into Virginia, the land began to change. The swamps gave way to rolling hills and farmland, which offered far fewer places to hide. Here, the Underground Railroad relied on blending in rather than disappearing. Wagons with false bottoms carried fugitives, farmhouses held secret rooms, and disguises turned runaways into free blacks with forged papers. One station keeper, a German immigrant with a talent for crafting documents, prepared mine with meticulous care. As he wrote my name, he looked at me thoughtfully. Isaiah, he said, carefully lettering it onto the false certificate of manumission. It means salvation of the Lord. Did you know that? I swallowed hard, hearing Mama's voice in my memory. Yes, my mother told me. He nodded, still writing. It's a strong name for a man chasing freedom. Isaiah in the Bible was a prophet. He spoke of breaking chains and opening prison doors. I hadn't known that part. Mama's lessons from the Bible had been shaped by the plantation sermons, which emphasized obedience, never liberation. When we finally crossed into Maryland, I sensed a change. Though still a slave state, its closeness to the free North made it feel less hostile. My new guide, a seasoned waterman who knew the Chesapeake Bay, laid out my choices inside his tiny boat cabin. Most people go through Baltimore, he said, pointing to a rough map. There's a strong free black community there that helps runaways reach Philadelphia. But, I pressed, hearing the hesitation in his tone. But Baltimore is crawling with slave catchers, he admitted. If you choose the water route, it's riskier in some ways. Open water leaves nowhere to hide if we're spotted. But if the weather's right, we can sail into the Delaware Bay and put you within a day's walk of the Pennsylvania line. If you were me, I asked, what would you choose? He studied me closely. You're strong, healthy, good with your hands. I can see that from your calluses, but you're no sailor. Stick with what you know. He tapped the land route. He tapped the land route. The train ride north was the most terrifying and exhilarating part of my journey. In hours, the locomotive carried me farther than days of walking ever could. But packed in with restless cattle, I lived each minute in fear of discovery. The conductor, part of the railroad network, promised to alert me when we crossed into Pennsylvania. I'll never forget that moment. The whistle blew 3 short blasts, our signal. Out the window, nothing looked different. The same farmland, the same autumn colors, the same fading sunlight. Yet everything had changed. I was standing on free soil for the first time. No law here recognized one man's right to own another. Silent tears slid down my face, mixing with the dust and straw. Not just from joy, though I felt that too. Not just from relief, though it overwhelmed me. I wept for Mama, who never saw this day, for all still in chains. For the boy I had been and the man I had become through blood, fire, and loss. My last guide brought me to Philadelphia, to a boarding house run by Mrs. Atkins, a formidable woman who had escaped slavery herself 30 years earlier. You'll stay here until you're steady on your feet, she told me firmly after hearing my story. Room and board in exchange for work. For 2 weeks, I labored from dawn to dusk. I patched leaky roofs, repaired broken stairs, and replaced rotten floorboards. The work was hard, but familiar. It gave me time to adjust to being free in a northern city. I soon learned that freedom came with its own challenges. Philadelphia's black community lived under strict rules. Laws dictated where they could gather and when they could be out at night. Slave catchers prowled the neighborhoods, empowered by the fugitive slave law. Still, compared to plantation life, these were restrictions I could endure. No one could whip me. No one could sell me. No one owned my labor but me. When I finally set out for Gettysburg, I had Mrs. Atkins's respect and enough money to make the journey. You're a good worker, Isaiah, she said as I prepared to leave. The skills you learned in that Georgia tool shed, they'll serve you well here in the North. I reached Gettysburg on a crisp autumn day, the trees ablaze with color. The small town was quiet, a sharp contrast to Philadelphia. Following directions, I walked south to a place called Yellow Hill. At its center stood the African Methodist Episcopal Church, a modest wooden building with a cemetery beside it. Children playing nearby stopped to stare at me. An elderly man sitting on the church steps rose slowly as I approached. "Can I help you, young man?" he asked gently, though with caution. "I'm looking for someone," I said quickly. "A woman named Sarah. She may have arrived from Georgia about 6 months ago." Recognition flashed in his eyes. "Then you must be Isaiah." My heart leapt. "You know me." He smiled. "Sarah said you'd come. She didn't speak of it as hope, she said it as fact." Extending his hand, he introduced himself. "I'm Reverend Cooper. Welcome to Yellow Hill." I struggled to speak. Is she here?" "She works at the Cunningham farm about a mile west," he said kindly. "She should be finishing up soon. You can wait here or I can point you the way." "The way," I said at once. "Please." He chuckled at my eagerness and gave me precise directions. I left at once, nearly running, my heart pounding. After all the months, the dangers, the losses, at last, I was going to see her again. Part 10. The Cunningham farm appeared as I crested a small rise, a modest but well-kept homestead with fields of harvested corn stretching out behind it. My heart pounded as I drew closer to the main house. Then I saw her. Sarah stepped out, a basket of laundry in her arms, her hair tied neatly beneath a kerchief. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking her. Graceful, steady, just as I remembered. My throat closed, the call I had carried in my chest for so many months stuck fast. She turned slightly, and our eyes locked across the yard. The basket slipped from her hands, linen spilling onto the ground. For a heartbeat that seemed endless, neither of us moved, each afraid the other might vanish like mist in morning sun. "Isaiah." Her voice carried across the clear autumn air, a fragile blend of disbelief and hope. "It's me," I managed at last. She ran. I rushed to meet her. We collided with such force it nearly knocked us both over. Her arms wrapped around my neck, mine around her waist, clinging as if the world would end if we let go. "You found me," she whispered, tears wetting my skin. "You actually found me." "I promised I would," I choked out. She pulled back just enough to search my face, tracing the new lines and scars, lingering on the mark left by the slave hunter's bullet. "Jonah said you were dead, that they shot you in the swamp." "They did," I admitted, "but the maroons found me, they healed me." Her eyes widened, filling with light. "Trembling Earth, it wasn't just stories, they exist." "They do, and they led me back to you." We sat until sunset on a fallen log at the edge of the Cunningham property, trading our stories like precious gifts. I told her everything: the wound, the maroons, the battle with Whitmore, the long march north. She told me of the others. Tobias had gone farther still, crossing into Canada, unwilling to trust that even Pennsylvania was safe. Esther had found work as a healer near Philadelphia. Little Gabriel and the other children were now in a Quaker school, learning to read and write, dreams they'd never been allowed to chase in Georgia. "And you," I asked quietly, "are you happy here?" She thought for a long moment. "Happy isn't the right word. Free, that's what I am. Even with the dangers, the work, the uncertainty, I wake each morning knowing no one owns me, that this life is mine to shape." She reached for my hand, fingers lacing with mine. "But I've been waiting for someone." "I'm here now," I said softly. Her smile, radiant in the fading light, told me everything. We walked hand in hand back toward Yellow Hill as twilight deepened. The future was uncertain. The fugitive slave law still cast its shadow. Whitmore, or men like him, might yet hunt us. Equality lay far beyond the horizon. But in that moment we had each other. We had survived. We were free. At the door of the small cabin Sarah shared with another woman, she paused. "Do you ever think of her, your mother?" "Every day," I said, my voice steady. "I see her in dreams sometimes, smiling free, Do I think she knows I made it, that I'm free? I looked up at the stars beginning to pierce the night. Yes, she knows. She always told me to remember what's inside. I think she was preparing me for this, for a life beyond the fields. Sarah squeezed my hand. Then she's still with us. We stood there, two souls who had walked through fire to find one another, leaving the cotton fields of Georgia far behind. Ahead stretched a future unknown but unbound, a future we would face together. Come, Sarah whispered, tugging me gently toward the cabin. Let's go home. For the first time in my life, I understood what that word truly meant. Epilogue. This was the story of Isaiah, who escaped Whitmore Plantation in Georgia in 1839. He lived with Sarah in the Yellow Hill community near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, until his death in 1907 at the age of 84. He never returned to Georgia, but his account of Trembling Earth and the Underground Railroad was preserved by abolitionists and later historians. He lies buried beside Sarah in the cemetery of the Yellow Hill Church. The echoes of Isaiah's story remain, a testimony to courage, defiance, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. If these untold histories stir your soul, join our community. Subscribe to witness more hidden truths from the shadows of American slavery. Your support keeps these powerful voices alive.